Breaking news. In a shocking and bizarre new development unfolding across the United States, law enforcement officers and first responders are reportedly collapsing, seemingly at random after coming into contact with, or even just from the sight of, the dangerous narcotic fentanyl. Experts say it is not the drug, but rather a form of mass hysteria. In multiple incidences across the country, officers are seen suddenly falling to the ground, struggling to breathe, and even losing consciousness after encountering suspected fentanyl. But according to medical professionals, there's just one problem. This shouldn't happen. Despite years of warnings from law enforcement training programs, doctors say that simply touching fentanyl or just being near it cannot cause overdose or instant unconsciousness. Instead, they point to a psychological phenomenon known as the nocebo effect, where fear alone triggers real physical symptoms. Many point to a controversial 2016 DEA training video that warned officers they could fatally overdose just by touching fentanyl. Experts now say that warning may have fueled a wave of misinformation and paranoia. Fear so powerful that it's quite literally making officers pass out on duty, and in some cases, having them Narcan themselves. However, this video has been proven to be false. Here's a quick look at some excerpts from it.
I felt like my body was shutting down. People around me said that I looked really white, I lost color. I thought I was dying. That's what my body felt like. If I could imagine or describe a feeling where your body's completely shutting down and preparing to stop living.
Like you were dying. You couldn't breathe. Very disoriented. Everything you did was exaggerated in your mind, I guess. It was the most bizarre feeling that I never ever would want to feel again, to be honest with you. It was so quick and such a small amount that we didn't even have time to think.
Let's take a quick look at what those officers were describing. Body shutting down. Felt like they were dying. Everything seemed exaggerated. And they couldn't breathe. Now let's compare that to symptoms of a panic attack. Chest or abdominal pain, fear of dying, derealization, shortness of breath, dizziness and nausea, chest pain and discomfort. It shouldn't take a doctor to tell you that the symptoms they described were perfectly in line with those of a panic attack. Now let's take a look at what it feels like for someone to actually overdose, and then we will compare and contrast. Did you notice the difference there? When somebody overdoses on fentanyl, you basically just fall asleep peacefully. It's actually quite comfortable. It is only when you wake up after being Narcaned to realize that you almost died and start going into withdrawal that you feel uncomfortable or start to get scared or panic. ER physician Dr. Michael Reed says this isn't a biochemical reaction, it is a psychological one. The idea that you can overdose just by being in the same room as fentanyl has been widely debunked. These officers aren't overdosing, they're experiencing panic attacks brought on by mass hysteria and fear. Two other countries with a big problem with fentanyl have practiced harm reduction strategies and proper education for first responders, and they have had very successful results, while America doubles down on their fear-mongering, having deadly results with the highest overdose rate in the world. No! We hear of first responders hesitant to deliver naloxone during genuine overdose emergencies due to the fear of fentanyl. The myth itself could be deadly to Americans.
Is there any chance it was a panic attack?
I don't believe so. We don't believe so. This trooper does not have a history of panic attacks.
If I didn't have backup there, I wouldn't be here today.
Don't take it from me. Let's hear from a properly trained first responder.
It's a common myth that just by touching fentanyl, you can absorb it, but you really can't. And it's important that we emphasize and clarify that. Inhaling fentanyl can technically cause an overdose, but it doesn't get aerosolized very well. So fentanyl has something called a low vapor pressure. So you really can't aerosolize it without some very complex mechanism. You can play with it, you can technically throw it up in the air and have it fall, and you really won't breathe significant amounts in. So it's not really dangerous to walk in a building that has fentanyl in it. You don't need a fancy respirator or anything like that. When someone overdoses on fentanyl or another opioid, their breathing will slow. They'll eventually become unconscious, and their breathing may stop altogether, and that's how it's deadly.
Thanks for tuning in. I just want to be clear, I am not advocating for fentanyl use. I am only saying that proper education and harm reduction strategies are better than fear-mongering. Fear-mongering has not worked since it started. It's only caused to more deaths, more drug use, and distrust amongst authority figures such as police officers and government agencies. Nobody trusts the media anymore, so please just stop lying, do your job, and don't worry about getting a little fentanyl on your finger. It will not kill you. That goes for mothers out there, fathers out there. If you find fentanyl in your son's room and you want to flush it, go right ahead. Don't flush your drugs. Don't even flush your prescription drugs. Please don't flush your drugs. There are safer ways of disposing it. I was just saying to not worry if you get a little bit on your hand because it can't absorb through your skin. And it doesn't go airborne very easily, as you heard the ER doctor say. Don't smoke the fentanyl. It's bad. Probably would kill you.
And they've killed 300,000 people last year, my opinion, have been destroyed by drugs, by fentanyl. The fentanyl coming through Canada is massive. The fentanyl coming through Mexico is massive.
Pardon me, Mr. Trump. To be clear, Mexico is responsible for 99.8% of the fentanyl coming into the USA, and Canada is responsible for the other 0.2%, if that. Total number of overdoses in the U.S. has been on the decline since 2022, and even then, only 108,000 died of an overdose to fentanyl. By comparison, then, Canada would be responsible for 270 of those overdoses in comparison to the 300,000 he just claimed. For perspective, that is over a 110% inflation. Comparing Canada to Mexico for drug smuggling is like comparing your daughter's Little League team to the New York Yankees and saying they would give them a go for their money. You are twice as likely to die from a self-inflicted gunshot wound than you are to die from a Canadian fentanyl overdose. So why don't you do something about your guns and drop all this BS about the tariffs?